So we are going to take another look at Garden Stories by Kevin Sanji, illustrated by Kristen Sora today. And we're going to focus on some different things that we didn't focus on yesterday. Things like main idea and details. And remember, the main idea is the big idea. And then the details are the things that help explain that main idea. So by finding the main idea and the details, it helps us to understand the big idea, the main topic, and then the key details that might tell like how and what, when, why, and where. And then we're also going to focus on comparing and contrasting, telling how things are alike and how things are different. And we're also going to take a look at story setting. Remember, setting is where the action takes place. So let's take another look at garden stories. Mr. Mendez's class took a trip to the botanical gardens. Botanical gardens contain many different types of plants. The plants can be outdoors or kept inside. All right, so let's stop and talk about setting, where the action takes place. All right, as I look at this page, I see that the setting is going to be at the botanical gardens. They're getting off the school bus for their field trip, and they're at the botanical gardens. That's what the sign says. The guide, Miss Gloria, led the class into the botanical garden. She was a botanist and knew all about plants. As Miss Gloria welcomed the class, she smiled. "I am so happy you are here today. I like to teach facts about plants. I also like to tell fables, which are stories that teach us lessons. Aesop wrote many fables a long time ago." "Follow me," said Miss Gloria. She led the class. Oop, I got to turn the page for you. She led the class to a big fir tree, to the big fir trees. Fir trees can be found in many places. Maybe you have seen one in a park. They stay green all year. They grow best in the mountains with lots of sunlight. Fir trees need lots of rain, too. Fir trees grow quickly. They make good homes for birds and other animals because they stay green all year. Let me tell you a story about a big fir tree, said Miss Gloria. Now, here's where our first fable starts, remember, because it has that italic print. And the author of Garden Stories included a character that tells fables, Miss Gloria. And remember, fables are like short stories that have just a few characters and they teach us a lesson. And a lot of times the characters in fables are animals or objects that kind of act like people or take on people characteristics. So in this first one, the fir tree and that bramble bush will be able to talk and think like a person does. Once there was a big, beautiful fir tree. Its neighbor was a prickly bramble bush. The fir tree was tall and strong. The bramble bush was brown and messy. The fir tree bragged, "People love me. They use my strong wood to make houses and furniture. Bramble bush, you are useless, and no one cares about you." Just then, a man came by and cut down the beautiful fir tree. He wanted to use the wood to build his home. The bramble bush watched sadly. "Oh, dear fir tree," said the bramble bush, "it is better to be simple and happy than fancy and all used up." Reggie raised his hand. "It's not nice to brag," he said. "It's not right to call someone useless," said Maria. Miss Gloria agreed. You're both right. You understand the lesson in the fable," she said. "Let's move over to the wetland area," said Miss Gloria. "This is an area of land where the ground is wet and sometimes underwater. We built a pond to create our very own wetland here in the botanical garden." "Look at the tall grasses," said Miss Gloria. "They are called reeds. Reeds are tall plants. They look like very tall grass. They can reach 16 feet high. Since they grow in the wetlands, they get plenty of water." "I have another story for you. This one is about reeds," she exclaimed. All right, so the type of print changes and it goes back to that italics print as we read the next fable. Some reeds lived along a river. A big oak tree grew nearby. The oak tree was over 200 years old. The oak tree looked much stronger than the reeds. One day, a strong wind blew and blew. The mighty wind was so strong that it blew down the big oak tree. The oak tree spoke sadly to the reeds. You look weak, but you are still standing. I am strong, but I fell. Why? The reeds replied, We are safe because we can bend and move. It is better to bend than to break. The class grew quiet and thoughtful. Lily's hand popped up. I don't get it, Miss Gloria, said Lily. Aesop is saying that sometimes the biggest are not always the strongest, replied Miss Gloria. And we talked yesterday also about how it's more important to be flexible than rigid all the time, because a lot of times if you aren't flexible and you can't go with the flow, you will break. Um, so I want to take another look and do a little compare and contrast here. So good readers look at how characters are alike and different to understand a story better. Let's compare the reeds to the oak tree in the fable. How are they alike? They're both alive, they're both plants, they both live by the river, right? And what happens to both of them? Something that happens to both of them is similar. A strong wind blows on both of them. But then how are they different? The oak tree looks strong and the reeds kind of look weak because they bend. But when the wind blows, we can see the oak tree breaks and the reeds bend and move, but they still stay in their place. They don't get taken away by the wind. So comparing and contrasting helps us understand how the reeds and the oak tree can be different and how they're alike. All right, class, let's look at another exhibit. How many of you have heard of olives? Asked Miss Gloria. Almost everyone in the class raised their hands. Olives are fruit that grow on olive trees. Olive trees grow best in soil. They need water and a lot of sun, Miss Gloria explained. Flowers will bloom on the trees in the spring. The olives appear green in late summer, said Miss Gloria. Olive trees are evergreens, so they should not lose their leaves. Now, how about one last story? Miss Gloria smiled. Well, before one last story, I do want to stop right here and talk about main idea and details. Okay, because as we read, it's important to think about the main idea or the big idea that the author is telling us about in this story. So, what do you think that the main idea is on pages 20 and 21? Probably that, yeah, the class is learning about olive trees. So the big idea is about the olive trees. And then there's the details, the things that Miss Gloria tells us about the olive trees. She tells us that that olives are the fruit of olive trees, that they grow best in soil, that olive trees need water and lots of sunshine, that flowers bloom on olive trees, and olives appear green on the trees in late summer. She also tells us that olives stay green all year and that they don't lose their leaves. So she gave us a lot of details about olive trees. So the main idea, that's learning about olive trees, and the details are all the things that Miss Gloria tells us about. Well, I'm ready to do that very last story about the olive trees, right? The last fable. And I can tell that things are changing because I see that italic print. There was once a beautiful green olive tree. The olive tree teased the nearby fig tree because while the olive tree was green all the year, the fig tree's leaves changed with the seasons and fell off for the winter. One windy day, snow began to fall. The snow settled on the leaves of the olive tree and became very heavy. The branches became so heavy from the snow that they broke. The olive tree was robbed of its beauty, but because the fig tree had no leaves, the snow fell to the ground and did not harm the fig tree at all. All right, so let's go ahead and compare and contrast these characters. Now, it's weird to call trees characters, but remember in fables, sometimes things like trees and objects can take on the same characteristics as humans. So they are the characters in this fable, the fig tree and the olive tree. So how are they alike? They both live in the same area, right? What happens to both of them? Well, both of them had a sudden snowstorm fall on them. How are they different? Well, the olive tree has leaves all year long. The fig tree's leaves fall off during the winter. And what happened when the snow fell that was different? Well, the snow broke the branches of the olive tree, but it didn't even bother the fig tree because it could just fall to the ground. So that's how we compare and contrast. We tell how the fig tree and the olive tree are alike and how they are different. The class was quiet again. First, Mr. Mendez asked, "Who can tell us the lesson in this story?" Then he looked at his watch and exclaimed, "Oh, we need to go." The children got back on the bus. "When can we go back to the botanical garden?" Thomas asked. "I want to learn more about plants and hear more stories from Miss Gloria." "Not for a while," said Mr. Mendez, "but we can go to the library and get books about plants and Aesop's fables," said Maria. All right. So when our author wrote this story, they had to know about fables and the characteristics of fables. And it looks like our author did know about fables because all of those characteristics of a fable, like they're short, they have animals or objects that act like people, and they teach a lesson. And that author made sure that they included all of those characteristics. Um, and then let's talk about, before we go, because we didn't talk about it much yesterday, what was the lesson that was supposed to be learned from this very last fable? I'm going to go back to the last fable about the olive tree and the fig tree. What did you think that was? I think it might have something to do with not teasing people, because the olive tree was teasing um, the fig tree because it stayed beautiful all year long. And so if you tease, you may lose what you value most. I think that was the lesson that we were supposed to learn. Now let's go back and take a look at a couple of vocabulary words before we're done here. Did I pass it? I didn't see it. Okay. How about exhibit? Exhibit. There it is. All right. It says, all right, class, let's look at another exhibit.
Exhibit. Something shown, such as in a museum or at a fair.
All right. And our botanical garden is like a museum. It's someplace you go to learn about things. And so the exhibit that they were going over to was the olive tree exhibit. So an exhibit is something that is shown at a museum or at a fair. And then how many of you have heard of olives? Asked Miss Gloria.
Olives. Plural form of olive. A small oily fruit of a certain tree. I like olives. Olives.
Did you notice all the different kinds of olives that were shown? Most common, we think of like the green olives or the black olives, but there are a lot of different kinds of olives and a lot of different kinds of olive trees. So the olives are the fruit of an olive tree. And there's one more. There it is. The olive tree teased the nearby fig tree because while the olive tree was green all year, the fig tree's leaves changed with the seasons and fell off for the winter. So fig.
Fig. A sweet fruit with many seeds that grows in warm places on a certain small tree. The fig looked like a pointed purple fruit. It tasted a little like a pear.
All right. So just like olives, a fig is a kind of a fruit that grows on a tree. And some of you may have heard of the cookie, the fig Newton. I don't know that we hear about it too much anymore, but they used to be very popular. And they had like little fig jelly in the middle of them. And that's what I have for you today. And thanks for being such good listeners.